Hello, everybody. Happy Monday. I hope you had an amazing weekend. Welcome to another episode of Monday Masters with Kokoist. So, today, what I want to talk about, instead of talking about any one product in particular, I want to get a little bit technical with our conversation today. We are going to be talking about sanding, buffing, prepping the natural nail, getting it ready for the application of Kokoist based products. So you're shopping, right? You go to cocoistusa.com and you're looking at our base gels. Say, for instance, you were looking at Mega Stick Base, this one here. This is a really nice soft base gel. You're looking at the product page. It's got a bunch of different information, a bunch of specs. One of those specs being sanding, and it says optional on it right there. This is what we're going to be focusing on today. So the conversation for sanding revolves around removing the shine and affecting the surface of the nail plate in such a way that we are prepping it to readily accept base gels. Whatever we're going to put on top of that prep natural nail, that nail needs to be ready to accept this product. If we leave it very, very smooth, if we don't buff or get it ready by dehydrating or anything like that, before applying the base, the chances of us getting lifting, delamination, and nails popping off is exponentially higher. So the term sanding specifically refers to the slight etching of the surface of the nail plate, which some people might find counterintuitive, and I understand why. We'll get into that in just a second. So, etching might be using something like an emery board or a file. This is a 180 grit emery board, or using something like a sanding band. This is a mini mandrel sanding band. This is also a 180 grit. Using one of these two kinds of products to go over the surface of the natural nail, add a little bit of texture. We're not digging in like crazy, just a little bit of a tickle, just to give it a little bit of texture so that the nail is prepped and the gel will really have something to grip onto. Now, remember when we looked at the product page and this one said the sanding is optional? That's great. That means you do not have to sand the natural nail, but to potentially, compromise the integrity of the natural nail. But that doesn't mean we can just go straight in on an unprepped nail and apply this product right to it. We would still need to buff. So this is the Kokoist Sponge Buffer Moon. This is a 100 180 grit sponge buffer. It's got that nice spongy core so that it makes the buffing very, very gentle, and it kind of hugs the nail. Instead of it being highly abrasive, it just helps to remove the shine and get a little bit of love onto there so that the gel can grip to it very nicely. So the great thing about Kokoist products is that you do not have to sand. Sanding is very much an option. So you can use something gentle like a sponge buffer just to remove the shine on the top layer of the nail surface. And these gels will still connect and adhere very, very nicely to the natural nail. Now, the reason that it says optional is because there are kind of two schools of thought and two kind of general topics to talk about when we are choosing whether to buff or to sand the natural nail. So the first school of thought, we're going to talk about not sanding. We're going to talk about just prepping and removing the shine from the natural nail. These gels are still going to adhere very, very nicely if you are to do so. This option is something that I would choose if this is a service that is intended on being removed every couple of weeks. So if we're just doing a traditional gel manicure that is soaked off every 3 weeks and reapplied, or adversely, if I have a client that has very, very weak nails and I'm concerned that doing any kind of sanding whatsoever is going to compromise the integrity of that natural nail, I am going to opt to only buff very gently to remove the shine from the surface of that natural nail so that we are keeping it as healthy as we possibly can. It is a much more comfortable service for the client as opposed to sanding, and we're still going to get really, really good adhesion out of our gels. The second school of thought here, and speaking personally as somebody who specializes in structured gel manicures, my services are not being removed every single time. We are prepping the nail, we are applying an overlay, and when our clients coming back, we are removing 80 to 90% of that product and rebalancing over top of the existing product. This concept intends to preserve the integrity of the natural nail by keeping that gel on. Treat the nail once, prep it once, apply the gel once, and then treat the new growth as it comes out. So, speaking as somebody who wants to reduce the amount of lifting as much as possible, this is where I would choose to use either a hand file or a sanding band and very gently add a little bit of texture to the actual nail plate so that the adhesion that I'm getting out of my gels is as optimal as I can possibly make it. So if I do a little bit of etching now and apply my gel to that, by doing that and eliminating as much lifting in the future as possible, that means I don't have to remove as much gel. I can keep that nail fully encapsulated in the gel where it is safe underneath there. And I don't have to re-prep that nail, because the more I have to re-prep that nail, the more there is a capacity for damage to be done. So a little extra prep work here to prevent potential future damage down the road. This is also a conversation that can come up between you and your client. If you take out your sanding band and your client goes, I don't know, I've had really bad experiences with that tool in the past, you can say, okay, it's not a necessary component. I'm happy to just buff your nails with this sponge buffer. We can see how the adhesion goes. And if it is optimal and we're working out and we're getting a lot of really good retention here, then we don't have to resort to the sanding band. If down the line we are seeing that we're having a lot of problem areas in lifting, we could maybe try adding a little bit of etching to your service to see if we get better retention. But the really, really magical thing is when it comes to Kokoist, you have that option. We have many, many Kokoist educators in our family, and I do know that some of them play on this side where they prefer to buff only in order to preserve the integrity of that natural nail as much as possible. And I also know that there are educators on this side of the conversation who prefer to do a little bit of light etching to ensure that they have that optimal adhesion to prevent that damage down the road. I am over here, but I absolutely respect the decision of the educators that stand over here. And this is going to be a decision that you choose to make for yourself as a nail technician, which side of this field you want to play on. Both of them, I think, are completely valid. And it really just comes down to the service that you want to provide that you think you can really stand behind. This is definitely a big conversation. I know that there's a lot of moving parts in it. I would love to hear your opinion. Please feel free to leave it downstairs, which side of the field you choose to play on, or if you like to do a little bit of both. That is super relevant too. But as always, if you have any questions whatsoever, the comment section is down below. You can leave your questions down there, and we'll do our very best to get back to you as quickly as possible. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Monday Masters. I really hope you learned something, and have a great work week. We will see you right back here next Monday for another episode. Take care.